Hello and welcome to this video on brain fog. You have likely either been recommended this video by a practitioner or you're simply interested in this topic. And the objectives of this video are to discuss the underlying causes of brain fog, to discuss the role that the gut can play within this symptom, and then to discuss ways to actually improve brain fog. So just to define brain fog, because it's a little bit of a general term, it was defined back in 2015 in the research as a constellation of symptoms that include reduced cognition, inability to concentrate and multitask, as well as loss of short and long-term memory. And it can be a very debilitating condition. I've certainly worked with clients over the years whereby it can get as bad where they struggle to actually have a conversation because they just can't concentrate. They struggle with word recall, and as this definition says, they struggle with just short-term memory. Now, what we see in the research in regards to underlying causes of brain fog are inflammation, food sensitivities, chronic infections, certain medications. Interestingly, sleep apnea can contribute to brain fog. We can have orthostatic intolerance or stress, which is related to an inability to manage things like blood pressure when we come up to standing. Gut imbalances, poor circulation, and hormonal imbalances. These can all contribute to brain fog. And there are some interconnections between them as well. So chronic infections could refer to a gut infection and therefore a gut imbalance, or it could refer to infection outside of the gut, such as a viral infection. Food sensitivities can be a result of gut imbalances, and both these things can contribute to inflammation and potentially hormonal imbalances. And poor circulation can have an impact on hormonal imbalances, it can have an impact on the gut, and I think is a quite common contributory factor to brain fog, because if we're not able to get enough energy and oxygen into the brain as a result of poor circulation, the brain isn't able to function as well as it could do. So, excuse me. So with all this in mind, how does the gut actually contribute to brain fog? Well, it is generally via the gut-brain axis. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what the gut-brain axis is, it's often referred to as a bidirectional pathway between the gut and the brain. And it consists of 4 pathways. There is a neural pathway, or the nervous system, an immune pathway, a hormonal pathway, and a metabolic pathway. And although this visual here may look a little bit sciencey, it does help us visualize what the gut-brain axis is. And you can see each of the 4 pathways within this visual. So if you look pretty much in the middle of the visual, you'll see the vagus nerve, which is in the color purple. And the vagus nerve has a huge role to play within this. It's interesting to learn that 90% of information that travels through the vagus nerve is from the gut to the brain, and only 10% is from the brain to the gut, showing us the importance of the gut within brain function. The vagus nerve is most active, it's most healthy, you could say, when we're in a relaxed state. And therefore, stress management, we quickly understand, is a huge factor within maintaining a healthy vagus nerve and a healthy gut-brain axis. On the right-hand side, we can see the metabolic pathway. It's called a metabolic pathway because our microbiome, the bacteria and other organisms within the digestive system, are producing metabolites ranging from neurotransmitters such as serotonin through to what we call short-chain fatty acids, which are produced when our bacteria ferment our dietary fiber. On the left-hand side, we have the hormonal pathway. One of the hormones involved here is the well-known cortisol hormone, which is part of our stress response. And cortisol not only can have an impact on the integrity of the gut lining, causing leaky gut when cortisol is elevated for a chronic period of time, but it also can cause changes to the gut microbiome. And just to the right of cortisol and the hormonal pathway, we see the immune pathway. And this is referring to certain immune cells and what we call cytokines, which are just inflammatory cells our immune system produces. Now, like the metabolic pathway, with the immune pathway, some of these molecules and substances are able to enter the circulatory system, where they're then able to either influence the brain indirectly or actually penetrate the brain via what we call the blood-brain barrier, which, as the name suggests, is really the barrier around the brain. And that can impact our mood, cognition, and emotion. So, is there any way that we can actually evaluate the gut-brain axis, which some people refer to as the microbiota-gut-brain axis, meaning the bacteria within our gut, the gut itself, or everything else that makes up the gut, and then the brain? Now, while there isn't a specific test for the gut-brain axis, we can do other tests that may help us understand if any of these pathways need some support. So we can do a comprehensive stool test to look at the microbiome and some of the metabolites that it is producing. We can look at a SIBO breath test to understand the health of the small intestine and whether there's a bacterial overgrowth there. We can consider a leaky gut test to look at the integrity of that gut lining. And if you're working with a practitioner, they may be able to recommend an alternative test because they're going to have a deeper understanding of your health history, your current lifestyle, and other symptoms that you may be struggling with. Now, we can't test necessarily everything through the test that I've just mentioned. And we mentioned one of the underlying causes of brain fog can actually be sleep apnea, which is a relatively common condition where the walls of the throat relax and narrow during sleep. This causes an interruption to normal breathing. It can actually deprive the brain of oxygen. And often we literally will wake ourselves up because we've either stopped breathing or we have a lack of oxygen supply. Symptoms can be loud snoring, noisy or labored breathing, repeated short periods where breathing is interrupted by gasping, or night sweats, which can be a relatively frequent occurrence as well. Causes are quite a diverse list of factors. Being overweight, being male, being 40 years or older. Interestingly, having a large neck increases our risk. And in fact, there's a significant increase in risk if we have a neck that is 17 inches or larger. Certain medications that have a sedative effect can increase our risk and contribute to obstructive sleep apnea. Having an unusual inner neck structure, alcohol, smoking, the menopause and nasal congestion all can contribute to this condition. And then, as you can imagine, certain strategies such as losing excess weight, cutting down on alcohol and smoking, sleeping on your side, learning to nasal breathe, and generally improving your health. There is actually some research on the gut microbiome and obstructive sleep apnea. Hence, I've added this bullet point of really just improving our overall health as a way to likely be able to improve this condition. There is a charity that you can contact to offer at-home testing for sleep apnea. And I've given you the website here in case this is something which is relevant for you. Now, food sensitivities is a really big one in my experience that can contribute to brain fog. We can obviously do some food sensitivity testing, as we discussed earlier, but in the research, we also see that gluten has been discussed as a factor within brain fog. Another strategy for those that might not be able to do a food sensitivity test for whatever reason would be to simply perform an elimination diet, where we're removing some of the most problematic foods to see whether we can get an alleviation of this symptom. And then we can have some general considerations as well. So from a dietary perspective, we've mentioned the elimination diet may be helpful. Now, this could be slightly more generic elimination diet, or it could be personalized based on some testing. Intermittent fasting can be very helpful for some people, and I think there are different mechanisms for this. Intermittent fasting, obviously you are avoiding foods, and if you're reacting to any foods, that could lead to benefits. But we also see a increase in the abundance of certain bacteria when we perform intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is good for the gut generally, especially from a gut microbiome perspective. Incorporating plenty of anti-inflammatory foods into the diet may be beneficial, and also incorporating lots of phytonutrients, which really means lots of color from our fruits and vegetables in particular. These may all be beneficial when we're on the topic of brain fog. Lifestyle interventions can include exercise, which can support circulation, which may be one of the reasons why it can be helpful. Stress management, breath work, cold exposure, and adequate sleep can all be helpful as well. A very quick case study I can share with you is a few years ago now, worked with a woman who had terrible brain fog to the point that she really struggled to have the consultation and to have conversations. She retired because she was a teacher and she just could not function anymore in that role. And she retired down to Cornwall, and she very quickly noticed that dipping in the Atlantic Ocean within seconds completely 100% cleared her brain fog. And now it came back a couple of hours afterwards, but she found this every single time she went in the ocean. Now, cold exposure, we know, activates the vagus nerve, which we've discussed has a role to play within the gut-brain axis. And when we activate the vagus nerve, there is an anti-inflammatory approach, or there's an anti-inflammatory benefit to the body. So by jumping in the ocean or taking a cold shower, whatever it may be, we're activating the vagus nerve, we're creating an anti-inflammatory response, and that may very much benefit symptoms such as brain fog. Now, from a supplement perspective, the only things that we've come across in the research are a substance called luteolin, which is found in a lot of different fruit and vegetables, but the level at which we need to alleviate brain fog is going to be higher than what we get through diet. Omega-3s have also been discussed, and obviously they have a natural anti-inflammatory property to them as well. And then, as always, if you're working with a practitioner, they will certainly be able to make some more personalized recommendations for you based on essentially a deeper understanding of your needs and potentially your physiology as well. I just wanted to add a list of things that we can consider from a circulatory perspective, because again, one of the most common symptoms I've seen over the years working with clients is cold hands and feet, which would indicate poor circulation. So we can consider exercise, avoiding alcohol and smoking, managing our stress, making sure we are breathing well and we have a healthy breathing efficiency and mechanics, which for example means breathing through the nose rather than the mouth. It means breathing deep into the belly, and it means having a light breath. We shouldn't really hear or notice ourselves or someone else breathing. We've mentioned the role that cold exposure can play within brain fog, but cold exposure, especially if alternated with heat therapy such as a sauna or a hot shower, very much helps circulation. Nitrate-rich foods such as beets and leafy greens, celery and carrots, and ginkgo have all been shown to be of value in improving circulation as well. So thank you for listening, and I really hope that this video has been both interesting and proves to be helpful for you if you're suffering with this symptom.